Well, hello there, and welcome to another exciting episode of Secrets to Real Estate Investing by House Flip Masters. We have a gentleman with us today that has escaped the rat race, and I love stories like this, and I'm really excited for him to share his journey doing that with you. His name is Mark Walker, and he's the founder of Luxmana Investments, which focuses on residential and multifamily investments. Mark was able to go from being a part-time investor with a full-time job in high tech to someone who quit his corporate job in pursuit of his passion and now thrives as a multifamily investor. So with that, welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you so much, Holly. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. So why don't you give us a little bit of your backstory and where you started and how you got to where you are today. Let's start.
Sure. Well, my journey began back in 2004. I bought my very first rental property. It was a duplex in South Denver, and I owned that for about a year or two. And that deal really got me excited because in the first year, that property earned me a 36.5% cash on cash return.
Woohoo! Yeah. I love it.
So it always lights a fire under you when your very first deal is so successful like that. Well, I ended up selling that property, and for a few years after that, actually, I sat out. And one of the main reasons why I sat out was because I was having a really hard time getting deals to pencil. And I'll also say too that if I had known back then what I know now, I might not have sat out those 5 years, because I now believe that as long as you know where to look and everything, there's always a deal around every single corner. But I did sit out for the next few years, and okay, that turned out to be a blessing in disguise as well, because then the market took its tank. So it was in about 2010 that I started to network again and get involved in real estate. So as you mentioned, I was employed full-time for a high-tech company at the time. I worked a lot of hours for that job, but I partnered with a general contractor in 2010, and we scraped a couple single-family homes in a trendy part of Denver. And at the time, again, the market was really challenged. It looked so different than it does today in Denver. But we bought the first one in an area called the Highlands, and this area was getting a lot of investment. And we ended up building a 3-story duplex in place of that house. And then we did a party well agreement, so that gave us the ability to sell off each side of the duplex. And before that project was even done, the second one down the street on the Berkeley side opened up. And so we did that one too. So that brings us to about 2011, when I started to reinvest some of those gains into rental properties. I knew I wanted to go the path of passive income because I knew I wanted to escape the rat race.
Nice.
So I started buying a lot of single-family homes. Most of them were condos and townhomes. Not only were those lower entry prices, but what I really like about condos and townhomes is the return post-tax is typically higher on a condo or a townhome than it could be on a single-family home. And that's because of the depreciation expense.
Okay, wait, let me just cut you off just a second there. When you
Sure.
say you're buying all these properties, I'm sure plenty of people, including me, are wondering, how did you buy them? Were you getting traditional bank loans to get these because you had a W-2 to make yourself lendable? Did you get partners? What technique and route did you go to get financing for all these?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I went the traditional bank route. You're right. I had a W-2 income, which did help. But I will tell you this. I'm sure a lot of your listeners know that when you're starting to build a rental property portfolio, you typically run into some different restrictions that Fannie Mae has for any lender that sells their loans on the secondary market. So I was really fortunate that when I did start down the path of building a portfolio, I teamed up with what is called a portfolio lender, also known as a balance sheet lender. And what that simply means is that once they originated a loan with me, they chose to keep non-owner occupied rental property loans on their own balance sheet. They didn't.
So tell us why that's a good thing, if you would.
Yeah, definitely. So those lenders, they still have, similar underwriting requirements, but what's great is they weren't subject to the Fannie Mae requirements. And some of the Fannie Mae requirements say that you can't have any more than 4, sometimes 10 loans. And if you're building a portfolio of properties, which we all strive to do, you're eventually going to tap out if you're not working with a portfolio lender. Now, I also mentioned I was buying condos and townhomes, and there's something called non-warrantable condos. Those are, the way Fannie Mae describes a non-warrantable condo is maybe that condo association has some outstanding litigation that they're a part of. Maybe more than 50% of the homes in that condo association are non-owner occupied. Those are just a couple of examples. I'll throw out another example too. Maybe the HOA doesn't have enough reserves. Those are 3 things that will make that condo non-warrantable. And if for a typical Fannie Mae lender, they're going to say no to you, no matter how qualified you are for a non-warrantable condo. But a portfolio lender will say yes.
So does non-warrantable mean non-financeable? Because I haven't heard that term before.
It doesn't. Well, yeah, with a Fannie Mae, lender, someone that originates a loan and then sells it on the secondary market, they're subject to the Fannie Mae requirements.
Okay.
They will typically not lend on non-warrantable condos.
Okay, yeah, I've not played in that market before, so that's news to me.
Yeah.
So tell us more about then why the return is better on condos than homes. You're saying because the depreciation is better?
Yeah. I'll give you a general rule of thumb, and you can actually, Holly, you got a lot more experience with the single family home, so you can tell me if you agree or not. A typical real rule of thumb is that when you go to do your depreciation on a rental property, when you do your taxes, you can usually say that 80% of your acquisition price is the actual building, the structure.
Right.
20% you can typically say that's land.
Right.
And it might vary by property, but that's a good rule of thumb.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you see with a condo or a townhome, there's less land associated with the acquisition price.
Okay.
When you calculate your depreciation, you can only depreciate the building. You can't depreciate the land.
Right.
So when you have a larger portion of your purchase price, your acquisition price associated with the building or the structure, you can depreciate more. So dollar for dollar, using that kind of thinking and rule, you're typically going to get a higher post-tax return dollar for dollar than you would on the single family home. That's why I liked the condos and the townhomes.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's keep going along your journey. Well, tell us more, if you would, about a couple of, if you remember any of the deals and the returns you were getting on them, and what kept you pushed and moving. And were you using that 1% rule that we hear that people look for rentals? Are you familiar with that, where you want to get 1% of the purchase price in monthly rental income?
I have heard that before, and looking back, there was times that I did observe that was kind of a general rule, but my primary metric was always cash on cash return.
Got it.
I never really paid much attention to cap rates and the 1% rule and stuff like that. Not to say that those aren't great rules, but my primary focus was cash on cash return. Now, again, I was buying at just the most opportune time in Colorado and the Denver market. Okay. I was walking away from any deal that did not have a 20% or greater cash on cash return in the first year.
And what year was that you were buying these?
That was 2011 through 2014. And by the time I got closer to that 2014 mark, I was settling for deals that were maybe a little bit lower, than that. A lot of them turned out to do better than 20% because at the same time the market was recovering. I was able to raise rents. I was able to get better than I expected rents and things like that. But I was literally walking away. If a property did not pencil for me greater than 20%, I was walking away from it. I think more about the deals I walked away from now than the deals I actually did, because today, as the market has recovered, all of those ones that I like 18-19% that I walked away from would have still been stellar deals.
Yeah.
But I guess that just kind of, goes to show you that as an investor, you have to stick to your acquisition criteria.
Yes.
You have to know what you're looking for and stick to it. As long as you have a formula for success and it's working, stick to it. So
that's great. Yeah, you got to create rules that you're going to live by and play by and stick to them. Otherwise, you can be all over the board and definitely lose money. So that's some great advice, to create some rules for yourself and live by them.
Yeah, definitely.
So that you had some good deals there. So what was the next part of the path of your journey?
Yeah, so my journey is a lot like playing the game cash flow. I know
Yes.
a lot of us we're all encouraged and inspired by that book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. So probably quite a few people out there that have played the game cash flow. And in that game, you start by doing small deals, and then you graduate to doing larger deals. And that is very much what my journey has looked like. So in late 2013, I bought my first smaller apartment deal. I bought a 12-unit apartment, and I was planning on holding that property for 10 years. I had a pro forma put together saying I was going to exit at this price in 10 years. And here's what my return and everything was going to be. About a year and 3 months in, someone came along completely unsolicited, off the market, and made an offer on that property that I just could not walk away from. It was almost the same amount that I said I would exit my property for another, at this point, it would have been another 9 years down the road.
Wow, what an exciting moment in time. That's awesome.
It was. And so what I did is I went ahead and sold that property in 2015. And then I 1031'd that with the help of two other equity partners into a 64-unit apartment complex in Irving, Texas. So now I'm going from Colorado to Texas. And here's why I made that transition from one state to the other. At this point, Colorado has just exploded. Colorado is actually compared now to cities like your area of the country, Holly, right there.
Yeah, Los Angeles. Yeah, it's so high.
Yeah, it's just taken off, and now we're being compared to coastal cities like your own, and that's great because I still own a lot of property in Colorado, but Texas still has some good deals. And at this point too, by 2015, that's when I jumped out of the rat race. I finally had enough passive income built up that I was able to make that transition and focus 100% on my investments. I've also been really fortunate because I have a cousin that has been doing multifamily for almost 30 years. And when I decided to make the transition, he welcomed me to come and sit in his office and see how the really big deals go down.
Cool. Yeah. That would be awesome.
And it was just such a great opportunity because, he doesn't touch anything less than about 100 to 150 units. He's doing transactions 200, 300 units at a time. And it is just such a completely different animal doing the larger multifamily properties. So again, going from doing small deals to large deals, I was given this opportunity to job shadow. So through about the first 9 months of 2015, I was job shadowing with him. And then in September of last year, I put that 64-unit property under contract and I closed it in December. And I'll tell you, 1031 exchange, here's a great story for you. I closed that thing on day 180.
Oh my gosh.
By the skin of my teeth.
Yeah.
It was that close.
Well, tell our listeners that may not know why that day is important or relevant.
Yeah. So whenever you do a 1031 tax deferred exchange, when you relinquish the property, the property that you sold is called your relinquished property. From that closing date, you have 45 days to identify replacement properties. And then you need to close on at least one of those replacement properties within 180 days. So you have another, that would be 135 days left to close the actual property.
And what happens if you don't? Like, say you're ready to close on day 181? Game over. Yeah. It's not, there's no extensions for that like there are for filing tax returns. So yeah, if you had any hiccups, it would have been a very sad day for you.
Yes, it really would have been. And there's several things that happened that slowed the process down too along the way. I won't bore you with that, but what I will say too is one thing that I've learned in my journey is the importance of your team. Working with people that you trust and that have a reputation of coming through. Because looking back on that, making that 180-day deadline was all about the team. I mean, these people from on the lender side and the property management side, the insurance side, they all made it happen, not because they had to, but because they could. And so having the right people on your team and in place, I just believe is so important.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah.
All right, so then you got up to 64 units. And I assume you have a property manager down there. Are they on site? Are they not? Or what's that look like?
Yeah, so this property is now big enough to where I was able to make the transition to doing on-site management. So yeah, I do have a property manager down there. They run all of the day-to-day. I play the role of the asset manager because someone still has to oversee the whole project, because that one is one that we renovated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so closed on it in December, and it took about 6 months to complete the majority of the renovation. Today, I came in under budget on enough things that I still have enough money to continue renovating units as the leases turn.
Nice.
Yeah, and what's nice about a multifamily property is that you have a standard template for all of your renovated units. So as those units turn, those leases turn, we go in, we apply the standard template. It takes about 5 to 7 days to do. And then we lease it back up at the full new market rate. And the other thing I really like about multifamily is that when we renovate a multifamily property, you're still getting rental income off of the property, because you can lease out 85 to 95% of the other units while you're renovating the property. You don't have to completely vacate the property in order to renovate it. So that's something I really like about multifamily.
Nice. Yeah, why don't you share, since this is your field of expertise, what are some ways that you can increase the value of a multi-unit project? Yeah.
So that's another thing too that I really love about multifamily properties is something called forced depreciation. Multifamily properties are valued typically with more emphasis on the cap rate. And so, if you buy a property, or a property, say a C-class multifamily property goes for, say, a 7% cap rate in a particular area, then by increasing the net operating income of the property, it's pretty predictable what that property is going to be valued at. So when you acquire a multifamily property, your goal is simple. You want to increase the revenue and you want to decrease the expenses.
Right.
If you can do those two things, your net operating income goes up, and so does the value of your property. And so, there's several ways that you can, increase your income. What I run into a lot is that prior owners, they might not be maximizing their utility bill back. So
why don't you explain what that is for someone brand new? What is a utility bill back?
Yeah, so oftentimes a multifamily property, depending on its vintage and stuff like that, they're all master metered. And so,
which means one bill for the whole complex, right?
Yeah, and typically that's common with water. Okay. You'll sometimes see it with electric or gas and things like that, but it's really common with water. And then, and you'll see it with gas too on older vintage properties. Usually your electric is already, so you don't have to worry about that. But water is a huge expense for the property. And if you're not billing back for water, then you need to start, because you're leaving a lot on the table.
Okay.
And so what you can do, and there's typically rules by, there might be rules in the city or the county or the state that says how much you can bill back, and they'll set the rules for it. But oftentimes I see that property owners are not billing back the full amount that they can to the residents. Now, kind of along the line too of water, and I know this is really important in California too, is water conservation.
Mm-hmm.
It's especially important with older properties where you have original toilets with the larger toilet tanks. You have, faucets that just gush water. There's nothing controlling the amount of water that flows out of the faucet. And you can significantly reduce your water expense by implementing a water conservation plan. And that typically includes bringing an expert in that can do an assessment. They'll go in, they'll look at the toilets, they'll literally watch the toilets flush.
How funny. They can assess it by watching it, huh?
Exactly. By watching it and measuring how much water those toilets are using for every single flush. And they'll convert, you can go in and they can either, if you want to go the less expensive route of water conservation, they can just kind of tweak those existing toilets. They can kind of change the amount of water that some of those toilets use and still, reduce the amount of water that they use. Or if you want to go all out, you can replace all the toilets in the complex. And
that sounds expensive. Or do they have different rebates and things to help along with that?
Yeah, you can sometimes get rebates at the city level or the county level. I'd say that when you're exploring that, still I think there's benefit in using a water conservation expert, because I have run across where the toilets that the city will buy for you, the free toilets,
yeah,
they're not they don't always flush the way they're specified. They're actually more water sometimes than what they actually are spending.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So I'm not saying don't take the free toilets. Just make sure you know that and that they're actually performing to spec, that the toilets that they're using. They'll also come in and put in water restrictors, or aerators on all the faucets, so it converts your faucets to low flow, so they don't gush as much. I implemented that on this water conservation plan on my 64 unit property. It's one of the first things I did, and I've been ever since then. My water bills have been about 40% less than the prior year's bills.
Holy moly, that's a huge difference. So how many dollars did that convert to in your bottom line?
Bottom line, it's about a $40,000. No, excuse me, it's like $38,000 or $39,000 difference.
That is huge. That's huge. And what is a water conservation specialist charge for their services?
That service, so I replaced every single toilet.
Okay.
I paid about $27,000, I think it was, to do that.
To change out the toilets.
For the toilets, they went in, they fixed all the leaks. Anywhere they found leaks, that's the other nice thing, is they go through every single unit and they find leaks, and they drippy faucets, they fix all that at the same time.
Nice.
They put aerators on, they change out the shower heads, so the shower heads don't gush as much water too, and they do all of that. Now, obviously, all of the units in my 64 unit are just single bathroom units. So that's something to keep in mind. The number of toilets that they actually replace could actually, change the price considerably. A 64 unit for me, that's cheaper than a 64 unit that has some 2 bathroom units and things like that in it. Right?
Got it. Okay.
So it's more priced by toilet as opposed to the number of units.
Got it.
So, yeah, but it gives you a great return. And what I love about it too is that you turn around and pass that savings on to your residents too, because if you're billing back for water like you should be, then that also translates to savings for them as well. And in this particular case, the prior owner was only billing back about 65% of water.
Wow.
They could have been billing back up to 95%. And the reason that they weren't billing back the 95% is because if they would have charged any more, they would have been very uncompetitive in the market. So by implementing water conservation, I was able to start billing back for the full 95% of my expense for water. But at the same time, my residents are saving about $10 per month.
Wow. So it's win, win, win for everybody, every angle. I love it.
It is. It is.
Oh. Well, clearly you're quite the expert at all things multifamily here now. It's really fascinating. We're getting it near towards the end of our podcast, but why don't you share some advice for somebody who is interested in learning more about multifamily, or if they've been doing single family and they want to jump into that? Where do they start to learn about that and get educated?
Yeah, one of the best things you can do is attach yourself to a sponsor or a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I had the benefit of having a family member that had been doing multifamily for 30 years, and I was able to job shadow him. I was able to sit back and watch how these really big deals go down. But now my journey was one of, again, doing smaller deals and gradually working up to doing larger deals.
Mm-hmm.
If someone wants to take a similar path to me, they can, but it's going to take them a while. No lender is just going to automatically say, oh, you've owned a couple single family properties, now you can go buy an apartment complex, right? The experience becomes a lot more important when you go through the underwriting process on a larger property. So it's really important to attach yourself to someone that has experience in multifamily, and that's a sponsor. And that might even just be the guy down the street from you, that owns the large apartment complex down the street. You could call that person up, start asking them questions, and I'll tell you too, especially in this environment, the deal flow is a lot less than what it was a few years ago, right?
Yeah.
So that guy down the street would probably love to acquire properties. If you were to go out and source a deal and find a deal for them, and then go to that person, to that sponsor, and say, hey, are you interested in doing this deal together? I can learn from the process of going through this process with you. This is also a great way for people that maybe don't have a lot of capital, right? So maybe you lack the experience and/or the capital to do a larger multifamily deal. If you were able to find the deal or source the deal and bring it to a sponsor, then that's a way for you to participate in the deal, get the experience, and also, that the sponsor can sometimes bring the majority of the capital too. He or she just needs the deal,
Oh yeah, 100%. I think that's really important that you added that when you're talking about calling someone up who's already successful and start talking to them. It's really important, in my opinion, that you bring value to the table. And you may not be experienced, but maybe you ask them, is there anything I could do to help you in your business? Are you interested in more properties? Could I source properties for you? What's something that I could do to help you, possibly in exchange for me shadowing you? So that's really important. Don't be just a taker, offer to give.
Exactly.
And maybe it's go take their car to the car wash and get their dry cleaning picked up. Maybe that's, their problem of the week that you can solve. You never know. So,
absolutely.
When you're reaching out, offer. All right. Well, for people that want to learn more about you and what you offer, why don't you share? Oh, and then you can tell our listeners about the free gift that you're offering and tell them what that is and where they can find it.
Sure. Yeah. If you'd like to learn more about what I do or even read my blog, you can go to luxmana.com. Luxmana is spelled Luxmana.com. And then also for anyone that's interested in multifamily, or maybe you already invest in multifamily and you're looking to learn about some of those less obvious ways to boost your net operating income, I would, as a way of saying thank you for listening, like to offer your listeners a free guide that I wrote. It's called The 10 Not So Obvious Ways to Boost Your Multifamily Property NOI. And you can get that by going to luxmana.com/Holly.
Awesome. That is so wonderful. So listeners, get out there, get some more education, and learn from Mark. He's obviously an experienced, brilliant pro at this.
Thank you, Holly.
Well, thank you for all your time today, Mark, and being such an open book and sharing so much and inspiring others, help them to believe if they're in a job, they can escape the rat race too. And just thanks for all you shared today.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity, Holly. It was a pleasure.
All right, thanks.
Hey there, thanks for watching the video. Make sure you like it and click subscribe to get notified of more videos. And you can go to hardhatholly.com for a free download on secrets to finding great deals.